Well, hello, everybody. I'm Ed Parcaut. I'm here with Brian Galke, and we are Aces53. That's attitude, commitment, enthusiasm, smile is what Aces stand for. 53 has to do with the first joker in the deck, which is their wild card. Tuesdays, we talk about a certain thing, and we talked about, what did we talk about?
Tom Hopkins.
Hopkins, that's right. The Art of Sale, and then that's what you read, and then I read The Art of Persuasion.
Right.
Which sounds like it's really easier for me to say earlier, but when you talk so much during the week. And so we weren't going to have a joker, but I interviewed a guy yesterday who was a pretty amazing person. And he comes from the same background of what we do with School of Hard Knocks when it comes to sales. And I thought he'd be perfect for it. So I'm going to bring him in. You good?
Yeah.
Everything to say? Sorry. Hey, Gary, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks. How about yourself?
You know, since yesterday, no difference.
So long ago.
Yes. Yeah, so Gary and he was on my Inner Edison podcast, and we were talking about sales and some other stuff we kind of talked about, and he was saying how I'm kind of the same like him, School of Hard Knocks, and I brought up Tom Hopkins, how we're going to talk about him today some more, and he's like, that's somebody he knew, and so you want to talk a little bit about that, Gary? Do you have anything, Brian? I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place.
No, go ahead and start. I'm making one banner for what I watched him on YouTube. And as you know, I'm going to have to leave here in a minute. So I was just adding in another banner because I am Brian Banner Galke. So
yeah, the Hulk.
Yes.
Yeah, no, thanks again. I definitely want to have the label joke. I like that. I can add that to my intro.
Yeah, it's the wild card. So just unless you can do jokes. So.
Okay. Well, we'll have to pull them out of me, but yeah. So to your topic, I think it's one of those forgotten or neglected skill sets in sales nowadays, right? Whether it's the art of persuasion, or in my book, I also reference to the principles of persuasion by Robert Cialdini, a book from 1980s or something like that. The same concepts apply, right? And I think it's like when I wrote the book, and again, it's based on a lot of the great smart people that I worked with over the many years I interviewed, and a lot of my own learnings. I remember always asking people, what's your favorite sales book, and so forth. And one that struck me was a friend of mine, a McKinsey consultant. He was like, Gary, that's a silly question. There's really only one book you need to read, and the first book, and any book that any salesperson needs to understand in depth is the principles of the art of persuasion. That is the fundamentals of driving sales. So yeah, just to tee up this conversation, you're preaching to the choir in terms of the significance of that topic.
And because his book though is, and I'm sorry, I'm in my other studio, I don't have it with me, Gary. And what's the name of your book? I know he'd have a copy of it.
Yeah, it's this bad boy, the 0 to 100 million sales blueprint.
Yeah.
It's endorsed by the head of sales at Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta. Very smart people I had the privilege of working with for over 10 years in my last company, and learned so much from. So it basically encompasses everything you would need about the entire journey. So not just about closing deals, or how to persuade or shorten the sales cycle, which sales technologies basically are putting in all the topics. If you have to launch a company, if you have to scale a sales team, there's a series of initiatives, processes that you need to put in place, and that's what I try to wrap up in my book.
Right. And it's a great book. I have it. Thank you for my copy. But the most important thing we kind of want to talk about today is persuasion, of course, if that's okay, if we can get in the first part, because Brian, you're really quiet today. I'm not used to that.
I'm doing another banner. Well, first I was going to interrupt and say, so Gary only works with small boutique companies. That's it. Nothing, really small, hard to find.
Well, I like my last project, we onboarded about 6,000 advertisers over a decade or so, and managed 300 million. The ideal customer profile was an SMB, spending a couple of $1,000s a month on Google advertising. One of those companies where the failure rate is very high. They don't have all the resources, and that's where sales and marketing really gets challenged, right? So I have all those experience. In my book, when I talk about the principle of persuasion, I actually devote a whole chapter to it. I take the reader through this journey of my sales careers, where I'm reflecting in terms of like different scenarios where I applied the different principles, right? Whether it's social proof and expanding on storytelling and creating an emotional connection with prospects, about resonating with a story, something that they can digest, taking a technical solution or something that's maybe difficult to decipher first, as long as they can relate to it. Again, that's an example of how you can push a lot of prospects throughout to the next step in your sales process. Or whether it's creating a sense of urgency. Many conventional sales techniques that maybe a lot of people forget. You see it very often in marketing copy and people that are great at building sales pages and sales funnels and so forth. But that's one thing. Another thing is getting on the phone, right, and then incorporating that into a discovery call process or a pitch process. That's when I think that's what separates the true boys from the men, when they can pick up on clues and then apply that to the pitch.
And that's what we've been talking about in previous episodes, was too many people are relying on text message or email. I'm guilty of it myself, but people have lost the art of picking up the phone and making a phone call. People want to do funnels. People want to do text messages. People want to do emails. The closest thing to a conversation is people do bomb videos, or, they'll do a video message for somebody, so that, it's a step above email or text. But people are still afraid to have those conversations because people get so used to having the perfect pitch, lining everything up. But really, the power is in conversations, right?
100%.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. We talked about that yesterday. We were both that way. It's like we were talking about how just pick up the damn phone. What is your problem? Get past that. I know there's only one way to actually know what's going on, is you pick up the phone, talk to them. They'll tell you to your face. You'll know exactly what you need to do. And if there's objections, you can take care of them right then and there and move on. And you can't do that through a text message or an email. It just doesn't work.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
And for everybody, I did put in the chat a link to your book. Now I put up the Kindle version. That was just the first one that popped up, but we did put a link out there to get it off of Amazon.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was Brian's link, of course, so that he can get paid for
it. I beat you to it. So, speaking of which, I have to relocate to my car, so you'll see me coming back on in just a second. Ed, the banners are all there, and I will catch up with y'all.
I'm sorry, I'm not Bruce Banner, so get out of here.
That's right.
All right, let's get closer. All right, so I kind of just, Tom Hopkins for me was everything about, Art of Persuasion, and it was everything that he talked about, is how to get people to make the decision that they already want to make, but you're helping them make that decision, because most people they only make a decision out of pain or pleasure, and usually they wait till there's a lot of pain before they make that decision, right?
Yes.
Do you have a story behind any of that at all?
Well, I mean, that could be a long episode. I have a lot of stories on that topic, but I even like to decipher it and take it a layer deeper. Like, for instance, I'm a big fan of coaching. I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in coaching over the years. I also have the Goals Grid and Gridness Planner, where it's a lot of exercises to understand the true drivers, right? What is not our intentions, what's not our desires, but what is the needs that we have. And it's all different. It's inborn to some extent. But I also put that in my book. It's like, instead of just looking at your prospects, and you're looking at firmographics and demographics, and you're breaking that down, and you're going all marketing and so forth, I say, okay, let's look at the psychographics, right? And this is not something that I've invented, but human beings were typically driven by 6 desires, like certainty, uncertainty, significance, love and connection, and then growing and giving. So if you are understanding your prospect, again, you're getting on the phone and you're asking a lot of questions. You understand the CEO who you're dealing with. Are they in the spotlight? Are they very charismatic centric? Do they have a lot of social media presence? Do they have a drive? Do they have a strong significance of building up their presence and making an impact there where you can speak to that, right? And influence in that direction. At the same way, if it's a very, less risk averse, highly analytical CEO, numbers driven and so forth, appreciates certainty, not that willing to do a lot of risk, then you can position it in a different way, and make them make the right decision. Again, it's not about manipulation in any way, as we spoke about. It's about shortening the decision-making process to make them go with what's A, right for them, that you truly believe as a salesperson, and B, making them more fast adopt that solution, right? Just helping them on the path toward that educational process. And the best way to do that is understanding the prospect in depth with those psychographics, if you put it that way.
And Brian's not on here right now, but how I met him, he is subtleskills.com. And what he does, he can tell you everything about you by reading your eyebrows, your nose. I mean, it's ridiculous what he can. I'm telling you, he was an introvert, and he's not on here, so I'll talk about him. But he was an introvert, and he learned this system and it took him from, being in, I don't want to say the mailroom, but basically copy all the way up to vice president of sales at his last company, because of how he was able to then. He knew who he was talking to, right? You talk psychographics. He knew who he was, so he could set his presentation up for that person and speak to that person. And that's a form of persuasion too, but you're actually communicating with them. Like if somebody has round eyebrows, example, they think about the people around them first before they think of themselves. So if you were going to sell them a house, you could talk about how's the kids going to, how are they going to use the house with the kids and when the people coming over. There's so much you can do with it, and it gets really in depth, because you can even get to micro expressions like in that show Lie to Me and other things. He'll be coming back on, but anything you can use, and that's what we're talking about, you being the joker and the wild card that you have, anything you can use to help yourself, help other people is what you want to do, right?
Correct. Yes.
Let's see if look at him. He got his whole sunglasses on. He's going to come in the car.
I'm curious, what are your favorites parts of the book, or in general, in terms of on the topic of persuasion?
My big thing about persuasion is the fact that people think it's manipulation when it's not, and the fact that we're helping people get to that point they want to get to by persuading and walking through the process. If you listen to the Art of Persuasion by Tom Hopkins, read the book, or if you listen to it, in the beginning, they talk about doing a card trick where they have somebody pick a card. It was like nine of hearts or whatever. And then they have somebody else who they persuade them all the way through to pick that card. It is so unique. So basically what they would do is, so they start with the process of there's 50. Is that, you got a nice 52 cards in the deck, correct? Yes. All right. So they break down to you have and if you had the red and black deck, you would say they break into red and black, correct? Which do you pick? Red. That's correct. We leave the other, right? So if you're trying to get to 9 of hearts, let's just say, and it's red card, you would then say, when she says the 9, the red, you would say that's correct. Okay, so that we have the red. If she would said pick the black, you would say, okay, that just leaves the red. It's a way that it's a unique situation. You have to listen to it, because I listened to it the first time. I was like, wow, how did they do that? And then they broke it down, how he walked them through that process of picking the right, whatever they said, the other, if it wasn't what they wanted, they made it like it was by just making that little statement. And it's an amazing process that you can do. And other people have used it. I'm going to bring in the car driving guy, and we'll put him down at the bottom. Hey, nice, cool car there. Nice sun. Can you hear us, Brian? Okay, well, I'm going to kick him back out. He's not it. I heard you. We're going to remove him. It's just going to be us. You can come in when you can hear. But through that process, so reading the book and listening to it, there's having the skills that they talk about that you have to have as a person. You actually have to be a giver. You have to be caring about other people in order for this stuff to work. The best people who can persuade people actually care about people. They're not there trying to take advantage of them. And that's, I think, I remember when I first got into sales, somebody said, I'm such a great salesperson, I can sell ice to Eskimos. And the question is, why would you want to do that?
Right? Yeah.
Why would you do that? That is horrible. That is not something you want to do in the first place.
Yeah. Exactly.
And one of the things I look back at when we're looking at the books that we're looking at and the sales skills of, you know, Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, Brian Tracy, any of the old gurus, are they still relevant today? Right.
I think
Because everybody's like, everything new is old. You know, no, everything that's important is been around forever. You can change certain things. Like, I don't know, you remember the whole feel, felt, found, right? I know how you feel. I felt the same way. This is what I found out. If you try to use that today, people know exactly what you're doing. Right. But you could throw it in Chat GPT and have it change the words and rework it to where you could still use the same thing to let them understand, you know, where they're coming from. You have empathy for what they're trying to do. There's so many things that you can still use of the old that will work today that I don't think people realize it.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I especially like your point on the genuine factor that you know, you truly want to contribute and help folks out, not sell an Eskimo ice for that matter, and just the simple fact of being liked. You know, it's you know, it's just more than building rapport. It's genuinely understanding your prospect and the needs, the solutions, being able and willing to walk away from the table if it's not a good fit. But I think so many folks are they may be behind on quotas, or they have stretched targets, or they're not successful in the role. They haven't done the legwork, right? They haven't maybe picked up on these books and read the fundamentals, which is more important than anything else at the end of the day, in my humble opinion. If you know those things, you will get clients and clients for life. And that comes by simply asking all the right questions and then tailoring your solution according to the needs. And the only way you can do that is by being, you know, building rapport, being liked, and that way provide, you know, enabling them to make the right decision. So It's not just the classy like seasonality, only 2 left, or create a sense of urgency, or all these other folks. It's about, you know, making them relate to it, right? I typically tell my reps, like, right, I'm sitting here at my other office today because the other office you interviewed me in yesterday, that's actually a sales team. We added 4 new guys to the team, and you know, it's small stuff like, you know, people will say, okay, is that manipulation or is that persuasion? But it's just like, if you want to convey a message and you're a new rep in a new role, and you said you can use this case study presented as is your, you don't have to say, Gary landed this customer 4 months ago and we did XYZ, right? If you need to tell it like in a more personal way and say, Mr. Client, this reminds me of Rich. Rich and I, we spoke 4 months ago. They were in the exact same situation yourself, or somewhat. Here was the scenario. Here's what we did. That's something they can perhaps better relate to. It's not you're telling the same message. You're not changing the outcomes or the narrative of it. You're just positioning it in a different way that helps them understand it better, and you're establishing trust with you as a seller and that prospect. So where's the fine line? And I think maybe that's where a lot of people get confused about thinking persuasion is manipulation, but it's not.
No, it's, again, and the definition is you're helping them get to where they want to go in the first place. And if you realize that, and I think a lot of salespeople they need to go back and read the old stuff, listen to the old stuff, because it makes a difference. A lot of the newer stuff that we hear is a retake on the old stuff, right? I mean, because for me, the best book for me, my first book was Think and Grow Rich, right? It made me think differently. Now, what I heard from Brian the other day is anybody can take that book and add it into their package because it's no longer copyrighted. It's public domain because it's outlived its copyright.
I see. Yeah, there's quite a few guys that have done that recently. So
now you know why.
Yeah.
Here, I'm adding this into my package, and you know, and so and so's Think and Grow Rich. No, it's not your Think and Grow Rich. You know.
Yeah.
I was trying to pull up my little. There was something. So one of the things we talked about when we were talking traits earlier, and I was saying that it says the most persuasive people, they have discipline. You and I talked about this yesterday, that you were saying that a lot of the people, I think your phrase was, How many people in the military are successful business owners? You were saying that yesterday.
Yeah, it was like in terms of CEOs for a certain category of companies within a certain size, it was a mind-blowing 60-70% had served previously, and a hell of a lot of them had then subsequently exercised martial arts. So it's just like two categories, two professions where you embody discipline, right? You just will not succeed without it, and you can transfer that into business. You become very effective.
Right. And then the other things, I'm just going to run through them real quick. Belief in themselves. Again, you got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in what you're selling. If you don't believe in what you're selling, you're never going to sell it. Empathy. Self-assurance to me is the same as believing in yourself. You have to have a desire to succeed, the ability to do what other people fear most. Right. So for me, I do everything that makes me uncomfortable within reason, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enthusiastic. You have to care about other people. Don't take rejection personally, and willing to invest in your education. And I think that's the biggest thing is people don't invest in their education as much as they used to in sales.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah, I agree, especially now with ChatGPT and everybody like, hey, give me a quick summary of XYZ. It's not the same as picking up a book in a paperback format and chewing through it over the course of a couple of weeks, where you have time to reflect and correlate the learnings with certain situations, chat about with somebody. So this, again, all these shortcuts and distillation summaries and all that, it's not the same, right? So yes, pick up the classics. There's a reason why the new movies you see today, they're basically been refurbished from old classics, right? And the hit songs always have the element of old classics as well. And the same goes with the learnings. They've been around and they will still apply for the next 10, 20 years, no matter what happens with AI, etc. Those principles will still be in place. It's just human psychology.
Right. One of the things he talks about is repetition. Right. So if you, in order to get good at what you're doing, you have to do it many, many times. And I think we were talking about this yesterday about how many times someone has to see something in order to think that that's the way that it should be going forward. I'm sorry, that was on my after you. It was a guy that was AI, and he was talking about how AI is taking over to a point where and he was from Canada, and then basically how it did mess with our elections. And this is somebody from Canada saying that it was that way in the United States, how they use it. And it's to a point where you get seen so many times on social media and stuff that you start to believe it, whether it's true or not. And typically, I remember when I used to do direct mail, they'd have to see it 3 times before they knew they thought of you like, oh, I remember this company. And I think it's a lot more now with the noise, but for you to learn something, you need to read it, say it, do it so many times that it's like second nature to you, where you don't even have to think about it. And that's what we've been talking about for weeks, how in sales, my presentation so we were talking sales scripts a while back. And we think they're so important. And I got thrown under the bus by somebody saying I can't use those. Those are horrible, blah, blah, blah. A sales script will eventually turn to a guide, right? In the process, how do you scale yourself without having a script? I know I'm a little off from Tom Hopkins, but we're on Art of Sell too, but you got to have the scripts. You need to have them, and you have to learn them so that you can turn them into your own.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, so you were talking about you're down here instead of up there in the cells, and you're just hiring more people. So can we go on? How do you train your people to know what to sell? Or how to sell, or how to talk on the phone, that kind of stuff? Or do you?
A hell of a lot of coaching, built basically what I call a sales playbook with a 60-day onboarding plan where they have to undergo certain curriculum. There's certain books that they have to read throughout that process. There's all product information, company information, competition information. And then, of course, there's a sales script as well. There's a rebuttal library as well. And the whole idea is, again, that they have, I say, you don't have to say it verbatim, but until you come up with something better, stand on the shoulders of giants and use something that is working, right? Don't try to reinvent the wheel. This is going to take you from like 0 to a 5, 6 of performance immediately, right? Let's memorize it by heart. I want to call you up 2 a.m. in the morning. You got to recite it word by word without looking at the script. Because once you get challenged, once you ask questions that you never heard before, because you're new in this industry, or jargon or acronyms, anything, all these prospects trying to get you off the phone or simply just challenging you, that is your fallback tool, right? The same goes with, I also train them on elevator pitch. So every time they're concerned, like, well, here at Elevate, we do X, Y, Z, and they can quickly position to that. So they get a ton of information, but the sales script is a cornerstone, at least until they can start, sprinkling it with their own flavor as they go forward. It makes sure that, again, you can't scale it otherwise, because then people will be constantly refining, saying what they think is better. And the value proposition is the same. It's just about saying it as effectively as possible, staying consistent with it, and then coaching them obviously in the tonality, tone of voice, how they position it, questioning, listening skills, all those fundamentals. So I would say it's not always in chronological order. We jump back and forth all the time. We're always going to start talking about something on day 60 because it's relevant at this point. But as long as you dump all the information, you have it in a chronological order, so they can always go flip back and start reading through it. I think that goes a long way. And then coaching, and mentorship, right? So I always try to pair up a new rep with an existing rep, so they can lean in and have an incentive-based system, so that they motivated somebody when it gets promoted to an AE or marketing coordinator, whatever it is, the role in the position. They have to first help other people become successful and meet the quotas, right? That's a contingency for that. So if you have all those different parameters in place, I think you're pretty well set off. The thing is that many companies that I work with, they have zero of everything I just mentioned, right? It's kind of, you're just thrown out in the deep water and try to figure it out, or you're learning by somebody else who may not have the same attributes as you, right? You can have one rep sitting, he's just a freaking monster. He's disciplined, high energy, and he's a contact sport. He's just like, it's a numbers game for him. Then you have another guy who's amazing ability to report and very charismatic and can do way less styles and build, establish better connection with others. So if you just try to replicate coincidentally who you're pairing up with, it's not necessarily you're following all the best traits, and you won't get a more predictable outcome. So for me, it's having all those elements in place and documenting the best practices. Wow. Sorry, that got a little sidetracked.
No, it's actually perfect, because the only thing I want to bring Brian in a second so he can ask a question. But my one question is, how long do you make them wait before they can change the sales script? Do you have like, okay, you can't make any changes for 6 months, a year? I mean, do you have a period of time?
I should have a rule on that. I actually don't.
Right. Just asking. I mean, because we had somebody else on, and they have a rule that you can't do anything for a period of time, because this works real well until you understand it. The reason it works real well is because we've been using it very long and we've created it, that way.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm going to bring you in if you have any questions. Brian, did you have any questions?
No, I like what we were saying before about you have to have a script. You and I have talked about that numerous times, and that is people go, oh, no, I don't need it. I can go off it. You can never scale if you don't have a script. And you also can't, if you're not moving, like if you have a message, your consistency isn't there if you don't have a script. Even, we were on something with Steve the other day, and what do they have? You have a script of what you memorize when you get on stage, so you don't look like an idiot. Because if you go up and try and wing it, it will never end well for you. So I agree wholeheartedly with that. And the idea, like you said, stick with the script for a certain amount of time. And even Tom Hopkins, what did he give to the audience in every one of them? He gave them a PDF or a workbook for them to study and memorize the material. And then once you get good with it, that's when you can alter it or change it.
All right. I'm going to kick you back out because it's noisy. All right. So, I mean, that's what we've been talking about we started this in January, and we've kind of, went through the whole process. But I think in sales, you have to have the script in place. You have yours, because you're talking about the book and everything you have in place. The only thing you didn't have is when can they make changes. I don't know if really people need to make changes, because for myself, I remember my business partner, when I was in Southern California, we had the same office. So when staff would come in, they could say it to us once, right? We'd have to go to one office and do it again. And when I'd pick up the phone, he's like, you start the same way and run it all the way through. You say the same exact words all the way every time you pick up the phone and all the way through. I said, how else are you consistent with doing your sales? And so I would train our sales staff the same way. I'm like, come listen to me, say the same thing. What if don't worry about it, just follow my lead. They're gonna no one has more questions than these that we have right now. They just don't, with what you're doing. And over time, you'll know, because we put in our script every objection we've ever gotten. Right. And so that way you already hit those before they have time to think about them, and slow the process down.
Nice.
Is there anything you do differently than?
No, it's the same, and sprinkling it with, you're probably asking yourself, why that, or what's the catch? Well, let me tell you, and answer the questions before they even surface. Same process. And I think my biggest challenge, I'll be curious to get your 2 cents on that and your experiences, is I just sometimes mesmerized about. I try to really position it, and I give them like a whole speech and reference all these things, and like, you got one job only right now, and that's to memorize this script, and it's a couple of pages long. It's not rocket science at the end of the day. So and I'm just amazed about how many folks that don't go in and fully adopt that. I typically, just to set the stage, because I love to show this clip from Will Smith when he's just got in the very first show of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air back then, and he's talking about that, how he really he would not fail on this opportunity of a lifetime for himself. So he just memorized the scenes and his script, in that sense, word by word, to the extent that he was like, you could see his lips moving when Phil, the character, the father in the series, he was also mimicking his lines just so he could keep track. That's how much he memorized it, right, to that degree. So it always blows my mind how reps, they can know the lyrics to a rap song or anything else, but this is your profession. This is a proven, battle-tested script that has given these people around you these are results that you want to desire, that you just don't go in and know it, like memorize it. So do you see those patterns sometimes where people just can't, they fail to follow through on learning the script, like from forwards and backwards?
I think just in general, some people just don't get it. Not everybody is going to be good at sales. The people who don't want to memorize scripts might be better in customer service, supportive staff role. But the people who, it depends on why you're in sales for the reason. I'm in sales for what I do. It's to educate people so they can go through and buy a home, because I think it's the greatest accomplishment you can do is to build personal wealth through home ownership, is to own a home. It changes your whole dynamics of your family, everything, because it's a totally different thing. But I totally see what you're talking about. When you were saying that, I was like, well, slap some little music in there and have them listen to it at the same time. And then maybe they might actually, make it rhyme to where they can pick it up real quick and remember. I do know that acronyms help out a lot with whatever you're doing. And one of the things I came up with and how I met Brian down the while back was I was speaking on stage and I was talking about how people, you've been in this business for a while. People don't buy because they just don't know K-N-O-W, right? And I always thought that was a stupid thing, was saying that they just didn't know, which meant they weren't educated. Well, I came up with an acronym, which was the knowledge needed to overcome waiting. And that's what you needed to get them to, is help them get past that part where they don't want to wait. And again, we talked about people buy for make a decision for two reasons, either pain or pleasure. And it's usually 90% of the time is only pain. But let's bring Brian in to see if he has anything with your question. Did you hear that question, Brian?
No, just who doesn't use a script is people who think that they know better and are smarter than the process. Yeah. And if you look at it from even when you call for troubleshooting on your computer or anything, when you used to have to call help desk, What did they do? They followed a script. Is it plugged in? Is it turned on? And that's, again, so you can grow companies. But it's people that don't have to follow. Like, there are some things, like with being a realtor, you don't have to have a script to show a house. So I get that. You just walk through a house, go left to right. But in most things, if you want to scale and grow, you have to have a script.
Mm-hmm.
And also you have to follow it. Right. So I think what Brian's saying is kind of what I said, is if they're not going to follow what you want them to follow, maybe it's you move to the next person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think it's the right observation. I'm particularly meticulous on it, like maybe because I don't constantly oversee what the SDRs, the BDRs, and so forth, but I'm very much involved with the account executives, for instance, and in a similar fashion to scripting is a demo outline, right, where it's step-by-step process, what needs to be shown, in which order, aligned with the pitch deck, sprinkling certain narrative that is intel questions that you had asked throughout the discovery process. So it's a custom demo process, and I'm very rigid on that, and people have to follow to the T, again, to Brian's point, because otherwise you can optimize the process at all, right? Then it's just circumstantial. So, whatever happens to the outcome could be a million different factors. This could be optimized. But I see time and time again, because we throughout the companies I'm involved in, acquire a lot of sales and MarTech, right? So I'm always sitting in the demos, and I'm just blown away. It's like, what would you like to see? Okay. All right, let's focus in on this feature, instead of like, no, there's a proven process. If we do this, we convert at 47% versus 22%. So whatever it is, you can ask those questions, but you set off the call in this direction. You make sure to show XYZ thing and tie it back with the pain point. Follow that to the T. So, I mean, that's really how you can influence deal success rates, in my opinion, and make a shitload of money, because people is just always focusing about the lead generation and setting up appointments and demos and so forth. If you got that to a certain degree, increasing closing rates is just so much more impactful. And it's the same principles about having a script. Obviously it can be fluid, but at least it serves as a guideline, a strong guideline that has to be followed.
Well, scripts turn into guidelines once you know them pretty well. Mm-hmm. I want to bring Brian back in. Hey, Brian, do you guys disc test your people before you in sales at all? Because I know we did in the mortgage industry. We started this years and years ago to see who our people were and see who was good for what. And we found out certain people just didn't work in sales, and then those people who were doing the certain were much better as processors and underwriters and other things. Mm-hmm. So my question is, do you test these people, and have you, Brian, test your people?
No, we never did. That was, and the way that a lot of HR companies are going right now is they're afraid to do that, right? Because they're afraid of, it's going to somehow bias.
He's in
people.
Colombia. He doesn't care.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. When we went to Scottsdale and Cossum was talking, he actually will make his people go through personality tests to understand, are they the right hire or not? And if you look, his business is 80 something VAs and only a small handful of full-time employees. But that's how he vets the thousands of VAs that will apply for jobs to figure out, are they a good fit or not?
That's smart. Is that with a disc analysis? Oh.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of them out there that you can, right, Brian? There's a bunch of different ones, right? Not just disc. Okay. I'm going to kick you back out.
What we do here is, let's put in my book, we have basically outline like a set of 20 attributes that you can look for when hiring sales reps, because it's not always it's not a cost-effective way just to hire the experienced reps from other companies. They're going to want 6 figures plus always, and they may not be successful in your role. They may have access to more resources, more support vehicles, and there's a lot of things that you can't determine. They're good at selling a product and themselves, so you're running a risk. So again, if you invest more upfront in creating that sales playbook and the entire system, and you have the right hiring process. So I have those challenges. Again, nothing is perfect, but on my end, what we do is, again, look for those attributes. They got to check off at least 50-60% of them. So there's some elements we can build on. At least there's a proven, they're shown passion, they're shown the competitor, the discipline, all these different things that it makes an impact in sales. And then typically the last interview is obviously with me, and I always do a role play scenario. I pull up, we have an ROI calculator, basically where you can put in some numeric values. That's basically them questioning a prospect and say, okay, we saw this information on your website. Let me ask you about XYZ factor and so forth. And then they start building the case. If they can improve XYZ metrics by that, what kind of incremental gains in ROI they will get. I let them run through it. They're very shaky. Obviously, they do have a script they can follow. But the whole idea is here for me just to look for and say, okay, that was good. Try to remember this. Try to apply this little change. I want you to try to position that or double down that. And then that's the true test. I want to see, can they be coached, right? Or do they get stuck? Do they get nervous? Or the ones who pick up on it and then can adjust with what feedback, as long as you have the right system and support vehicles in place and you can coach them, they will become successful in your role, at least in most scenarios.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the other thing is I would have people do the same thing, and it's a little different now. Sorry, I forgot to turn that off. Do not disturb for only 30 minutes and we're at 41. So I just think when people need to keep adding, and the one thing we have the problem, especially in California, is just like Brian said in other places, you have to worry about not to offend somebody these days, to a point where I guarantee you, we're going to see more and more sales from other countries selling to United States, because they can not, I don't want to say be the Glenn Ross sales department, but be able to ask these questions, test people, making sure that they are the right person for the job. And that's just because what they like to do, not because yes, they can do it, but they might not like it. I have a processor who would be a great salesperson. Most of the processors that you have become great loan officers if they want to, but most of them go, I don't want to work commission. I don't want to do it this way. I don't want to do it that way. I want somebody who, like me, when I was in the service, the reason I hated the service was the fact that somebody was in there over me a few months or a few days longer than me that could tell me what to do, but had nothing to do with how smart you were. And I'm like, that's not how I like the sales environment, because how hard I work is how much I get paid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard finding everybody that way. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of both commission based and a little, the hour. You can't be all straight commission, but then you have some people who are like, I just want to be this way because I want to make as much as I possibly can. So it just depends on the individuals. And I think, again, using disc testing, any of the additional testing to make sure their personality will do good in that environment would probably help in what you do.
100%.
Yeah. Gary, we've been here about 42 minutes again. I appreciate you coming back on today and talking. Yeah. And your book is great. 0 to 100 Million Sales Blueprint. Everybody go check it out. It's on Amazon. We put it down below in the notes, and I'll put it also on YouTube in the notes once we're done here. And these, just so you know, this will be automatically on our YouTube channel, Aces53, on my channel, Ed Parcaut, and also on Brian Galke's Subtle Skills channel.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was definitely a fun round two. No wonder we went to 42 minutes. It was a hot topic.
Well, the thing about sales, we could talk about sales. I could talk about sales forever. You know what I mean? Because it's what I've been doing forever. And I want to help people. We're so used to the low-lying fruit that we've had in my industry and other industries the last few years that now you actually have to work. The cost of acquisition of a client these days is expensive. So you want to make sure you don't lose them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, Gary, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? Is it through your elevate.io?
Elevate.io is one of my companies, so they can go to my name, GaryGarth.com.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody go check out Gary Garth at GaryGarth.com. Reach out to him, let him know that you saw him here, so he knows that, he didn't waste his time being here. And I want to appreciate everybody who watched this. And if you like what we do here, the easiest way that you can help us is to subscribe and support us that way. And Gary, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Ed. It's a pleasure.
All right. Don't run away. Everybody else,